UK regulator, Competition and Markets Authority (CMA), it has slammed Google for breaking UK competition laws by using its influence and using anti-competitive practices in prioritizing its own ad exchange. My colleague Sumita Karir with details on the phone line.
Yes, in fact, the UK Competition Markets Authority, that is also called the CMA, has accused Google of abusing its dominance in the digital advertising market and is also now escalating pressure on the tech giant over its ad tech business practices. Remember, these allegations are nothing new to Google. Several other cases as well, Google's ad practices have kind of lawsuits have been going on. In fact, these allegations came in yesterday. They claim that Google has been unfairly using its market power to favor its own services, and that's at the expense of competition. This is something very, very similar to what companies in India are also fighting over the dominance of big tech platforms. But specifically with this particular case, the CMA's findings actually follow a 2-year investigation, and this could really result in a fine worth billions of dollars or an order that requires Google to change its practices. So pressure building up on the big tech company. Remember, because Google plays a significant role so far as its role in the digital advertising market, advertising ecosystem is concerned. It provides key infrastructure for publishers to manage ad spaces on websites, apps, and potentially everything and anything that is linked to the digital advertising or the digital medium. In fact, CMA's investigations have revealed that Google allegedly exploited its dominant position, and that was disadvantaging publishers and advertisers who actually rely on fair competition. In fact, let me also take you through some of the other findings of CMA that also claims that Google, actually used its ADX, that is its ad exchange, that really gave it an unfair advantage, probably because Google had the first mover's advantage so far as the digital advertising market is concerned. The regulator claims that Google, manipulated advertiser bids in its own favor, so they hold higher value. And all of these charges really coming in from the CMA. In fact, in response, Google has, of course, disputed these allegations, stating, that its ad tech business actually provides value to partners in a highly competitive sector. It also states that these interpretations are perhaps flawed. And of course, will be interesting to see what further course of action does Google take. Remember, Google has had, an early mover's advantage so far as the digital advertising space is concerned.
And let's take this story forward now. To talk more on this, I'm joined by Mr. Abir Roy, legal advisor of Alliance of Digital India Foundation, and Pawan Dugal, senior cyber lawyer. First of all, beginning with you, Mr. Roy, and let's talk about the implications of this case. Well, we talk about Google. It's always in the dock, but why only in Western countries? Why in countries like India, it is still not being, if we ask about these kind of things don't happen for Google in India?
Thank you for having me. First of all, Google has been under the antitrust lens even in India, but not for the present matter which we are discussing right now, but for other issues like bundling of their search engines, etc., and also for the payment policies. They have been investigated by the CCI in the recent past. So it's not that Google has been left scot-free in India. So they are under investigation. In fact, even on the advertising bit and on sharing of revenues between the publishers and the advertisers, there is a present investigation which is going on. Although not as broad as the CMA present investigation as it stands, but there is an investigation which is going on as far as the sharing of revenues between Google and the newspaper publications are concerned. So it may not be proper to say that they have been left scot-free as far as India is concerned. Obviously, the nature of investigation which has been carried out by CMA under this ad tech issue, which, like your colleague mentioned, has been also been under investigation by the US authorities, the European authorities, and the Australian authorities, is yet to start in India. But let's see, time will tell whether CCA also starts an investigation on the ad tech model.
Yes. I will go to Mr. Dugal, Pawan Dugal on this once. Good evening, Mr. Dugal. This is Sumit. I would like to ask you, this was defended by Google, saying that it is a flawed interpretation. How much do you agree with this? Is it a flawed interpretation, or definitely Google is under dock for a lot of these practices across the world?
Well, please understand the regulators around the world are now looking at monopolies like Google with a microscopic lens, and therefore trying to argue that everybody is flawed and the interpretation is flawed may not necessarily be a sustainable argument in the long term. Yes, you can argue that one regulator is going after you. You can argue two regulators are going after, but please look at the various trends in different jurisdictions. Recently, we found in America, an American judge has held against Google for its anti-competition practices. We already find in India, a complaint has already been made now afresh to the Competition Commission of India. Already the Competition Commission of India had previously also examined the entire issue in another matter. And now the news comes from UK. The UK competition watchdog has come up to a prima facie interim findings. Now that clearly shows that there is something much more than what meets the eye. Now you have to quickly start realizing that if you're the dominant player, you are going to go ahead and misuse your particular monopoly. But so long as if you provide a level playing field, that's something that people will not really grudge against. But in case if any player is going to go ahead and misuse their monopolistic powers for the purposes of dominating the market, then in today's world, post-COVID-19, we are bound to see new challenges. Now, these big tech players with big, deep pockets like Google have to now realize that post-COVID-19, the world has already entered into a new era. I call this the age of the new cyber world order. In this new cyber world order, one of the essential elements of the new characteristics is that states are getting very powerful. And that's the reason we find that regulators around the world have started investigating the adoption and continuation of monopolistic trade practices by big digital giants. No wonder Google is under investigation in a number of jurisdictions. Well, it's entitled to go ahead and dispute the particular finding by a particular regulator. It will have access to legal remedies. It can go ahead and use those remedies as well. But that's not going to prevent the regulators from performing their primary regulatory functions of trying to ensure that there's a level playing field in the digital markets ecosystem. Well, you can be a dominant player, but so long as you go ahead and promote a level playing field, the regulators are not bothered. But in case if you're going to use your dominant position for the purposes of depriving others any pieces in the pie of the huge digital market, then it's bound to create more shakeups, more potential challenges, and more complaints.
Absolutely. On that note, I will go to Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, well, UK regulator CMA has this objection. Well, they have taken Google to task. How likely is that it will be charged on the same issues in EU or maybe in Asia, in India, or maybe in Australia?
So, like I was mentioning before, these are all series of investigations which are going on against Google. I think the ad tech stack which is there of Google has been under constant scrutiny at least for the last 2 or 3 years by all these authorities. I think the flavor remains the same. Whether their ad tech entire model, right from the publishers on one end of the spectrum and the advertisers on the other end of the spectrum, whether the entire stack which is there, what we call as the ad stack, are there any agreements which Google enters into with both the publishers and the advertisers with one another? Is it an issue? So this flavor, this investigation has been going on both, like we mentioned in the initial comments also, across entire geographies. So what will now be interesting is obviously what the CMA has done is send across a statement of objections, which is akin to a Director General report as far as India is concerned. So it is a detailed report on what they believe are the issues. Now, Google obviously will come back with a response of what they believe it to be a fair model, but obviously the regulator will decide whether it's fair or not fair. Now, assuming the regulator does agree with the statement of objections and comes to the conclusion that Google is indeed being unfair to their entire ecosystem, to their own benefits, then the question remains as to what will be the remedies which all these regulators will impose on Google, because that's the key challenge in my opinion. Right now, it's more of a fact-finding exercise which is going on. Once the facts are unveiled, and if it is found that it's an issue, when Google is charging monopolistic prices from the advertisers and the publishers, etc., and the entire value chain is in the vice grip of Google, then how do you ensure, as a regulator, that level playing field is maintained? Because that's the key. Like Mr. Duggal was also pointing out, we need to ensure, or the regulators need to ensure, that there has to be a level playing field. Now, that is a very good objective in mind, but how do you achieve that will be a concern. So I think the regulators, in view, should speak to each other. I'm sure
Right.
they're speaking to each other. All these regulators have those MOUs, and then to see how the remedies will come into place, because that's the key objective from now on.
Right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me for this good debate so far. The Google's troubles in UK are concerned.